Welcome back to The Journey, a conversation series from Collegiate Sports Associates featuring leaders from across the intercollegiate athletics landscape. In this episode, CSA Vice President Dr. Brad Bates sits down with his friend and colleague, Josh Fenton, Commissioner of the Summit League, to learn more about his journey to the Commissioner's chair. Brad, take it away.
So my name is Brad Bates. I'm Vice President at Collegiate Sports Associates, and today I have the honor of visiting with a good friend and a respected colleague, the Commissioner of the Summit League, Josh Fenton. Josh, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Brad. Great to see you. Always great to talk to you.
Yeah, great to see you. So first of all, we got to start this right off. I'll confess up front, the Tigers are 2 games back behind the Twins.
And by the way, I don't know that neither are real good.
We've had a long fast for the Tigers, that's for sure. Although
we're both chasing the top of the Central Division right now. So, yeah. But as you can appreciate, we talk on June 7th here. We probably have about, 100 games left in the baseball season.
There's a couple. There's time. It's early. But I did notice your Vikings picked up the quarterback from my alma mater, which was nice.
Yeah, there may be a questionable decision there given where he went to school, but we'll see how that works out.
Oh, very good. So you and I started at Miami at the exact same time. We both, if I can remember this right, we both arrived in 2002. Does that sound right to you?
That's correct. I was there. Yeah, you're correct. I think you were maybe a few months before me, maybe the summer. I don't know if it was the spring. I was there in the fall. And I came to really specifically work with the men's ice hockey program. I was interested at the time in being an assistant coach in college hockey. And so Rico Blasi, the head coach at the time, who you know very well, had an opportunity as a volunteer assistant position. And so I came on and was fortunate enough to be able to complete my graduate degree at Miami for those first 2 years. And for some reason, you saw something. I'm not sure what you saw, but then I had an opportunity to work with you more directly in the athletics department in the roles that you afforded me, which was great.
Well, yeah, and you're humbly talking about this. Pretty early after your arrival, I remember Rico coming over and saying, keep an eye on Josh. He's a special guy, and that's where it really started. You occupied a lot of my focus. And every promotion you got, you earned. I mean, you were a great asset to the athletic department at the time. But think about this. You were a volunteer. And within a relatively short period of time, you're in the senior staff for the athletic department. First of all, talk about how you make a decision to volunteer in what was really a full-time job at the time.
Yeah, I mean, you can appreciate this because you've been around the industry, worked at lots of athletics departments. And when you start out, at least when we kind of started out in the industry, you had to start out at some level, and that level was usually on the lower end. And like I said before, I wanted to be a college hockey coach. And so what I did was I graduated from Iowa State. I went and lived in Minneapolis. I worked for a big worldwide consulting company called Accenture. It was a good job. It paid me very well as a 22-year-old back in like 2000, 2001, like $45,000 a year. I mean, at that time, that was a great job. But it just obviously wasn't overly professionally fulfilling. And so I had this crazy idea that I was going to go work in college hockey as a coach. And I sent letters, literally letters. Email was around, but it was send it through the mail type of thing to about 3/4 of the Division I men's programs across the country. And I grew up playing hockey in Minnesota. I played high school hockey. I wasn't good enough to play at the collegiate level, but most of those letters went unanswered. Some were answered, thanks, but no thanks. Who are you? Type of thing. And I got lucky. I mean, there was a mutual connection, to be honest with you. A gentleman that I knew at Iowa State that knew a former assistant coach at Miami, Steve Miller, who's an assistant coach at the University of Minnesota right now.
Right.
Who coached Rico when Rico was a player at Miami. And through a friend of a friend of a friend, I got connected to Rico. And at that time, they didn't have a volunteer assistant. So, yeah, I mean, I gave up $45,000 a year to come to Oxford, Ohio. I'd never been to Oxford, Ohio before. I, like everybody else, knew it as Miami of Ohio. But when you go there and you live there and you love it, Brad, we don't call it Miami of Ohio. It's Miami University. And it's not University of Miami. That's in Coral Gables, Florida, right?
We learned pretty quickly. And as the true RedHawks would say, we were a university before Florida was a state.
Before a state, that's right.
So let's dive into that a little bit. How did your experience working directly with the coaches and the student athletes, because you were involved in every detail of our hockey program, and we were good. About the time you got there, Rico and the staff were starting to flip things around. We had plans, and we ended up building Steve Cady Arena. We played for a national championship. We had Hobie Baker finalists and winners. It was an incredible time. How did that experience inform what you're doing today?
Well, I think it informed it in a few ways. Number one, an appreciation for the job of a coach. A head coach, an assistant coach. As I said, I wanted to move into the coaching realm and then eventually administratively, but it gave me an appreciation for what coaches kind of go through and the ups and downs, and how do you build culture, and how do you build a team, and it's not as transactional as one may think, although I think we've moved towards a more transactional environment recently. And so Rico and Chris Bergeron was an assistant coach at the time. Jeff Blashill, NHL coach, was an assistant coach at the time. Barry Schutte was also on the staff as a volunteer assistant. Eventually Brent Brecky, who's now a head coach at St. Lawrence. So we had great people, Nick Petraglia, we had great people around the staff, and great hockey minds, and people that really understood what it was like to build culture. There was this mantra of the brotherhood that represented Miami hockey, well before Rico got there as a coach. And it went back to kind of the days of Rico and Chris being players. And Rico really fostered that environment. So I got a chance to learn and understand the importance of culture. And then, to be honest with you, Brad, with you, just understanding the importance of culture within an athletics department. Who do we want to be? What do we represent as an athletics department in kind of this grand landscape of Division I, where we're so very diverse? So those that sit at the top and those that sit in kind of the mid-major space. I thought you did a great job with our strategic planning process of creating culture of champions to really identify who we are and where we wanted to be, and putting goals in place to get there. And so I think a big thing was kind of just the identification of culture. I think the second thing from a student athlete standpoint is just an appreciation of what they go through as a student athlete, and the commitments that they make to compete at the highest level, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's off the ice, certainly on the ice. Just an understanding of everything that they go through, and really an appreciation and a knowing that we have to take care of their experiences maybe more so than what I would have thought when I came into kind of the volunteer assistant coach role, and then eventually as an administrator. So, it was a great experience. It taught me a lot. My experience at Miami overall shaped me as to who I am today as an athletics professional, and it was just a lot of fun.
We definitely benefited from the leadership before us. Eric Hyman and Joel Maturi just did a fantastic job. They hired great coaches. You think of the coaches that we had around us, from Rico to Terry Hepner, Charlie Coles. It was an amazing lineup. And then David's just done a great job there as well. It's a special place. So during that time, we also, the Big Ten announced that they were going to have their own hockey conference. And so we entered into discussions about forming our own conference. And just for the audience out there, the NCHC doesn't happen without Josh Fenton. He did all the behind the scenes work to get things done long before he became commissioner there. So I remember you and I huddled up having a conversation in I think it was a storage closet somewhere in the press box, right?
In Yager Stadium.
Yeah, during a game. So anyway, in a lot of ways, those may have been the building blocks for looking at this profession from a commissioner's viewpoint. Talk about that a little bit in the formation of a league.
Yeah, well, first off, I would go take it maybe a step back. So Miami, prior to the NCHC hockey-wise, was in the CCHA, right? And so you afforded me the opportunities to participate in CCHA meetings. So an understanding of what goes on in a conference meetings, and then I was also fortunate when maybe you weren't able to participate in some of the MAC meetings. And so that's where kind of my first introduction to what are commissioners doing? What's it like to, engage a membership and work from a conference office standpoint? But yeah, you're right. I mean, that for me and where I am today, the start of it was probably connected to the formation of the NCHC. And Brad, as you remember, I mean, that was an incredible process. To think that we, and I appreciate the acknowledgement of my involvement in it, but it took a team of people, you, me, plus people from other schools, to really get it to where it became when we announced it. But to think that it was nothing, like literally nothing, a concept, to a conference announced, to a conference operating in its first year, and then just go ahead and fast forward, what would that be now? 11-ish years later to where it is, which is arguably the most successful competitive college hockey conference out there on the men's side. I really got an appreciation of what it took to number one, build a conference, and then the intricacies that go into a conference from a governance standpoint, to a media rights standpoint, to a staffing standpoint, to an officiating standpoint. Again, we had to create all of that from nothing. And so that really kind of helped me, I think, maybe grow very quickly in what it took to be a conference commissioner. Because if you recall, Brad, like we worked on all of that before we hired a commissioner. And then I'll also remind you that I was not the first commissioner.
All I remember.
So although I interviewed the first time around, the membership, understandably so, hired Jim Scherer, former CEO of the United States Olympic Committee. It was former United States Olympic Committee CEO or Miami Senior Associate Athletic Director. I mean, I don't know.
He wasn't there long.
So it worked out in the long run.
Yeah, it worked out getting your leadership in there as well. So completely different question. Favorite 80s music band?
That's a good one. I appreciate like a little Journey, a little Def Leppard, Speedwagon, Styx.
So classic rock.
What's that?
So classic rock. You still got it on 80s.
80s on 8, Brad. 80s on 8. The presets in my car, because I have Sirius XM, is 80s on 8. I think is maybe the first one or the second one.
It's a little scary, and a bad decade, by the way.
Yeah, I know. You think it's a lost decade of music, and I think it's one of the best, if not the best.
So let's talk about work-life balance. You met your wife in Miami. You have 3 great kids. How do you manage, especially a commissioner has multiple bosses, right? You're working for presidents at several different universities, working with athletic directors. How do you balance the commitment that it takes to be a commissioner with your dedication to being a father and a husband?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. First off, as you know, when we work in this industry, it's a team effort, right? So whether it's your spouse or your kids or extended family, whatnot, that kind of gets consumed by what you do. And so when I worked on the campus, my wife was fortunate enough to also work for the university a little bit with the athletics department, if you remember, and then she moved over to the ice arena as the director of programming. But you really immerse your kind of family life within the campus culture and the athletic culture when you work in an athletics department. I think that works best. And so it wasn't just that Josh worked at Miami University and I went to games and I was gone when I went to games. I mean, a lot of times it was, our family engaged in and around the athletics events, whether it was football or basketball, hockey, what have you. And so just the support that you have around you is vital. And I have some of the best, we're all biased, right, with our families, but I think I have the best support that I could ask for. And that, starts with my wife, Lindsay. And then the boys, as they've grown and gotten older, more mature, they have an appreciation, I think, more for kind of what comes from this life. And being on the road, when dad has to go for work trips, they understand that. But the support that we have at home, in particular with the activities that my boys are involved in, I just couldn't do it without Lindsay. And she works part-time from home, which is great for her and for us, and she loves it. But to be able to have her, frankly, manage and shuttle regularly is, we just couldn't do it without him. And so having that support system is really, really, really important. And then for me, our boys are very active, sports especially. You miss things. There are moments when I've missed things where it's really bothered me. But then you also know that that's part of it. But then you prioritize, even maybe at the sacrifice of some things professionally, being involved, obviously, in their activities. And so, for instance, I coached Ryan's hockey team the past 2 years since we moved to Sioux Falls as the head coach. That wasn't by my design either. That was the hockey director asking me to be the head coach. But it was has been really fulfilling experience. But it's a way in which I can also kind of remove myself, I think, from a professional environment that's very consuming and be an important part of our boys' lives as well.
Yeah, that's great. I played for my father, and that was one of the most meaningful experiences I've ever had in my life. And so to have that connection with your son is really special. So the world of athletics, is it crazy right now? Is it on a fateful plan? Is it so decentralized in leadership? Is it too much power to the dollar? How do you navigate through all of this, working with your presidents and your athletic directors and the other commissioners?
Yeah, it's really hard. Crazy is a good word. Unstable. There's a lot of words to describe it. I think a lot of us feel maybe for the first time in our professional careers that, especially those that have been around a lot, we're not quite sure what's coming or going, which is, for those that maybe want to have some control is hard. For me and for us, Brad, in the Summit League, it goes back to, really a few key things. Number one, and I really learned this and I embody this today because of how you thought about things. If we're gonna sit there on a college campus and we're gonna have activities, associated or within a college campus, it better have some good connection back to what is the educational mission of the campus.
Yeah.
And so as we think about the experiences and the opportunities of student athletes, I feel as though that we've crept further away from the connection to what they're there for in the first place, which is to be a student. And so we try to recenter ourselves around how do we make sure that our experiences are connected to the academic mission. You used to say very well, and I steal your line, hopefully you're okay with this, that if athletics is going to exist on a campus of higher education, it better be inherently educational. And, for us in the Summit League, that kind of is number one. And so we need to ensure that. Number two, as the economics have changed, especially at the top of the system, and now we have new structures coming into place a lot through the legal system, I think it's really, really important that we continue to maximize broad-based and equitable opportunities. I've got no desire to just become a basketball or a football factory. I've got a lot of desire to influence the lives of as many student athletes as I can. And if I were an athletics director, I would think the same thing. But I also know that the economics are pressuring the system significantly. And you're reading, even in the last couple of weeks, how decisions may need to be made regarding potentially less opportunity in the future. And when I read those and I hear about those things, that's a little bit of the melancholy moment for me, and I know others across the industry. The third thing is we have to be financially responsible and sustainable. And Division I is a really interesting space because we are very diverse in Division I. I don't know Division II or Division III as well, but I don't think they're as diverse in those divisions economically as we are in Division I. And so when we are so diverse economically in Division I, we have to be careful about putting structure and rules in place that say everybody just has to do this because of whether it was legal, political pressure, a group of schools believing that this is what they need to do. And so how do we create a system bifurcated probably in some manner to where we have the flexibility of one group of schools and conferences can do what they need to do, and another group of schools and conferences can do what they need to do. But for everybody, and their definitions of this, I think, are different, needs to be financially responsible and sustainable. And I think our concern is that maybe we continue to move down a track to where we're being asked to do more, and it's kind of, we ask the question, for what reason? Because of economic pressures at other areas of Division I. And for me, I think those are kind of the three key things. It's this connection education, maximize broad-based and equitable opportunity, and it's financially responsible and sustainable. And if we can do those things, I think our path can be healthy in the future, but obviously it's being questioned right now.
Yeah, the American model of integrating sports within higher education, you can make a pretty compelling argument that it may not be the best at times, right? When it's done well, it's unbelievable because, as you said, it can be used as an athletic curriculum that facilitates the development of students, and so we'll see what the future presents to us. But with the leaders like you in positions like you're in, I'm optimistic. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just like a really quick anecdotal. So I get the fortunate opportunity to travel around to all of our championships. And the Summer League's a great conference. We've got great strength in our foundation of our membership. But we also understand the landscape that we occupy and the neighborhood we live in within Division I. I'm not naive to think that we're somewhere different. I go to a championship, pick the championship, the golf championship, men's or women's golf championship, and I see our student athletes finishing at the end of the rounds on the third day, and they're embracing one another, and they're embracing their coaches, and some of our administrators are there, and they're embracing their administrators, especially those where their eligibility is expired. Brad, I can tell you that their experiences at our institutions, wherever it is extremely meaningful. And will some of them maybe, and that's a big maybe, go play the PGA Tour or the LPGA Tour? Maybe. I would say less likely than likely. I hope they do. But they're going to go on and do other things. But my belief is that their experience at North Dakota State or Oral Roberts or St. Thomas will have prepared them a lot because of their athletic experience, but academics as well, for what will come next in life, which likely isn't the PGA Tour or the LPGA Tour. And my goodness, we cannot lose sight of that. If we lose sight of that, then I ask ourselves, what are we doing?
Yeah, and that gets back to the culture you were talking about earlier and what you're developing. And you'll be proud of me. You educated me a lot about golf. I'm actually going to the U.S. Open that's just down the road here.
Right, Pinehurst, yes.
Yeah. Which will be a lot of fun. So last question, any last plugs, anything if I'm a high school prospect or I'm in the portal, why should I choose the Summit League beyond what you just said?
Wow, really good, great question. Number one, I'm extremely bullish on our future. We have institutions, what I would say, are committed to the Division I experience at a high level, an appropriately high level for who we are. You know, we don't certainly exist in the neighborhood of the A5 or maybe to some extent FBS, but the experience that you will have at all of our institutions as a student athlete, regardless of sport, I think is a great experience for kind of who we are in the Summit League and how we're compared to like conferences across the mid-major space. We've got some great institutions academically. We've got some great metropolitan markets. And so it's a great time, I think, to be bullish on the Summit League, because I think our trajectory is only up from here. And so for student athletes that are looking for great experiences, I don't think you find much better than what you could find here in the Summit League.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Josh, thanks for your time. Really appreciate everything you're doing in your leadership role. And make sure you give Lindsay a hug for us.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. Say hi to Michelle and appreciate you guys having me.
All right. Take care.
Thanks.